All right, what's up, YouTube? You guys are going to get a little behind the scenes look right now at the making of a Rideshare Guy podcast. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it. Welcome to another episode of the Rideshare Guy podcast. We've got episode number 13, and the title of this episode is What Does 2015 Have in Store for Rideshare? So I just want to give a quick hello and a quick shout out. I know we've got a lot of new listeners out there. For those who don't know, I had a nice piece where I was featured in Wired online magazine. And apparently getting featured in Wired is very good for business. So I had a huge traffic spike, obviously, but a lot of opportunity actually opened up from getting featured, and definitely some cool things that I'm going to be working on. I'm going to be sharing a lot of that with you today, obviously going over the state of rideshare and kind of my expectations for 2015. It was pretty funny actually how that story came about. I just got an email from Jessie Hempel, who was the author, and she was kind of asking me about, she said, a couple of my Uber drivers have been telling me about your site, and I said, oh, cool, awesome. I'm definitely always open to talk to some media, and hopefully I can give them some good information. And if they can quote me in a story or anything like that, it's always a benefit and help get my site out there a little bit. So I ended up talking to her, and I didn't even really realize that it was going to be a feature piece all about me. So when it came out, I was pretty surprised, shocked, and obviously happy. So definitely a lot of opportunity that came about from that. So I'll get into that a little bit. And quick shout out to everyone who's reviewed my podcast on iTunes and given me 5 stars. Definitely a big help if you guys go in there and leave reviews, because the more 5 stars I get, when I go and reach out to contacts, they always look up my podcast and say, hey, this guy's legit, or this guy isn't so legit. So the more reviews and the more 5-star ratings we have is always good for me and for good for you guys, because I'll be able to land better guests. So quick shout out and thanks to Dan Seal, Get Fit Burma, Eugenia L, Seaman 813, and Major Hudson. So today's show is going to be about the future of rideshare. We're going to talk about basically what does it hold and what's in store for us as drivers and the industry in general. I actually just did a huge post that I released last week, ended up getting over 40 experts. And I got everyone. I was surprised how the feedback and the response I got. I got everyone that you could imagine: reporters, other drivers, other bloggers, and just anyone who's an expert in the field of rideshare. And they shared with us their expectations, anywhere from a few sentences to a few paragraphs. So that's definitely some good information, great information. In fact, I'll leave a link in the show notes. If you guys are interested, you can go and check it out, because I think we definitely had some awesome quotes, and basically just gathering information from some experts out there. And it's always important to get opinions and viewpoints from other people, so I really like that. Today's show, we're going to be talking about a lot of basically all the issues that are going to matter a ton to rideshare drivers and the industry in general going forward in 2015. We'll cover all the insurance and regulation and government type stuff. Obviously, there's been a ton that's going on in that field, and 2015 I don't think is going to be any slower. And we'll even talk about a little bit of international expansion, what the future for Uber and Lyft and rideshare in general when they start going into other countries, because obviously it's not just a U.S. phenomenon anymore. And then everybody's favorite topic, we'll do a little Lyft versus Uber, kind of analyze what the future holds for these two companies, where they're headed, and what's in store for them in 2015. And we'll even talk about some competitors. So we will touch on Sidecar, but I'm also talking about some other competitors you guys probably even haven't heard of. I think it might be not necessarily a shock, but will definitely be interesting to you that there are a lot of other companies out there. And then also the other companies that are emerging right now to support drivers. I mean, obviously my site is, I try to help drivers and you guys all know that I'm all about helping you guys out and figuring out ways to earn more money and provide resources and strategies. So there are lots of companies out there like that are basically just out there to support drivers, because as we've seen, there's now a few 100,000 of us and we're growing rapidly, and there's a huge market for all these companies that want to market to us, and we're becoming a more valuable asset. So that's definitely something that we'll touch on. And make sure that you stay tuned to the end, because I'm going to give you guys a quick lowdown on what I have planned for 2015 for the Rideshare Guy blog and podcast. We've got some pretty cool stuff that's going to be coming out. I'm really, really excited. We actually have an RSG app that's going to be coming out. I'll talk about that a little bit. And a ton of great video content. We've got video courses and YouTube channel now, and we're even on terrestrial radio. So our show is now syndicated on WRLR 98.3 FM Rhonda Radio in Chicago. So if you guys are listening on the radio, big ups to you guys, and definitely expect more of that. And one other thing that I want to mention to you, there's a brand new Rideshare podcast that's coming out. And at the end of the show, I'll announce it. I'll tell you guys where you can find it. It's not my podcast, but I was actually a part of the first episode. So definitely stay tuned, and I'll give you details on that. Ow. Okay. So before we get into what 2015 is going to look like for rideshare drivers, I just want to give you guys a quick recap of 2014. Now, what did we see in 2014? We obviously saw some explosive growth, right? I mean, you just look at the value of these companies, Uber in particular. Obviously, I mean, I think at one point, they were worth $4 billion, and then $20 billion, and then $40 billion. And it seems like at this point, every single month, they're getting a new $1.6 or $1.2 billion investment. And that's cash, baby. That's cash money that they're getting. And obviously, they know how to spend it. But we just saw a ton of drivers joining, right? The rideshare, I think, really exploded in 2014. I don't know if 2015 will see quite the same growth, but I really think 2014 was the year of rideshare. I mean, I kind of call it the mom test. My mom heard about rideshare in 2014. I think she might have even tried Uber once. So that's when your mom and when your parents start hearing about it, I think that's kind of the ultimate sign that you've really made it. Now, as far as on the driver's side, we obviously saw, I mean, at the beginning of the year, it was a great job. It was actually more than great. It was an amazing job to be a rideshare driver at the beginning of 2014. And that's really what first attracted me to it and made me start this whole blog and podcast. So obviously things are not the same as they used to be because rideshare is such a great job. I think a lot of drivers don't realize that other people want to do it. And when you look at it from Uber's point of view, if a ton of people want to do it and they have a high supply of drivers, they're obviously going to lower the fares. So I think maybe drivers don't want to hear this, but we may have been overpaid at the beginning of 2014. And I mean, I remember there were days when I would turn on the app and just go drive around on a Friday or Saturday night and make $30 to $40 an hour. And that's pretty good, amazing money. I mean, that's more than I make in my day job for sure. So that's something to consider. But obviously we've seen fare cuts in 2014. And I think that although we saw a ton of growth as far as drivers and fare cuts, I'd still say 2014 was overall a positive year. We kind of ended the year on a little bit of a sad or sour note for drivers with fare cuts, but there's still definitely a ton of opportunity. And, 2014 saw a lot of drivers on board. And I think going forward in 2015, we're going to kind of separate, some of the best drivers from the average drivers. So definitely something to keep in mind. All right, how's it going, YouTube? So far, so good? Let's keep going. So, as far as 2015, the first topic we're going to cover are the insurance issues. Now, 2014 was obviously a very interesting time for insurance, we'll put it that way. I kind of mentioned in an earlier article that when I first joined Lyft and joined Uber, I thought it was kind of cute that I had to lie to my rideshare or to my insurance company, and I thought it was almost kind of comical. I felt kind of like a badass to be able to lie to my insurance company and really stick it to them, right? Because they weren't aware that I was a rideshare driver, and they still aren't, but I called that Rideshare's little white lie. I wrote a big article that got a ton of press, and really the issue with insurance wasn't the coverage. I mean, at this point, the coverage is fine. You're covered by Uber or Lyft. You have primary insurance, but the real issue comes up when if you get into an accident and you have to tell your personal insurer, there's obviously this huge issue of you being dropped. Now, a smaller issue is the insurance gap period where you have the app on, but you don't have a request at that time. I'm always sitting in a parking lot. I'm rarely driving, so I'm personally not super worried about that. And there have been a ton of studies and things like that have shown you make more money when you're stationary instead of driving around looking for a PAX. You might be able to make one move, but just keep that in mind. And there's actually a statistic from a survey I did at the beginning of the year when I surveyed my readers. I had over 200 responses, and 90% of you told me that you have not told your insurance company. Now, I thought that was pretty astonishing. And in 2014, at the beginning of the year, I think it was you guys probably all felt similar to how I did. I said, it's not really a big deal. As long as we're covered, that's the main thing. We'll get coverage and they'll resolve this issue eventually. But as 2014 drew to a close, we really didn't see a lot of government interaction, and definitely Uber and Lyft, it's not their highest priority. And that really puts drivers in a tough spot because you're the ones taking all the risk when it comes to getting dropped by your insurance. Now, like I said, you will get covered. There is a $1,000 deductible with Uber and a $2,500 deductible with Lyft, but drivers are really the ones taking all the risk. And I think in 2015, we're going to see these insurance issues all resolved. Now, like I said, the two main ones are getting dropped by your insurance company and then also the insurance gap period. Now, just the other day, in fact, Colorado was one of the first states. They now require primary insurance during that gap period. And Uber came out and they said, okay, we're going to provide primary insurance during that gap period. So there's still, I don't think it's a huge issue, but if you're driving for multiple TNCs at the same time, if you're driving for Uber and Lyft and you have the app on and you're waiting for a passenger, which is that gap period, you now have double or even triple coverage if you're also doing sidecar. And personally, if Lyft and sidecar come along and provide primary insurance during that gap period, you'll basically have triple coverage, which at first I kind of thought it was a bad idea because why over-insure? It's going to make things more expensive in the long run. But at this point, I'm all about the drivers. And if Uber and Lyft have to eat some extra cost and figure out a way to pass it on to passengers, then I'm going to say that's okay because they clearly haven't shown that insurance is a priority for drivers. 90% of you guys out there haven't told your insurance company. I think that's a shocking statistic and one that going forward, personally, I'm not comfortable. I want to be able to not have to tell this white lie. Obviously, if my insurance company asked me directly, I would tell them. But we need some type of, whether it's regulation or resolution. And I think it's likely going forward in 2015. We saw in Colorado that they have this gap period. There's really no issue with that insurance gap period. And there's even Farmers and USAA, they now say that it's okay. They're gonna add a rider for rideshare drivers. Is that confusing? Rider for rideshare drivers. They're gonna add a rider that basically says, hey, we're okay with you being a rideshare driver. Uber and Lyft are gonna cover you at all times during that insurance gap period and once you have a passenger. And they say it's okay. They're gonna add on, obviously they're gonna make it a little bit more expensive, but from what I've seen, it's not gonna be a ton of money, maybe up to 25% more or up to $10 a month more. I've seen a couple numbers in that range. But for that extra security to know that you're not going to get dropped, I think that's huge. So, like I said, I think we're going to need some type of regulation and, we need these governments to come down and basically say, hey, Uber, Lyft, you guys got to provide coverage at all times, because clearly it's not, that's in driver's best interest. That's not necessarily in Uber and Lyft's best interest. So I think in that case, a little bit of regulation is good. Obviously, we don't want too much. And as far as insurance companies, I think we're going to start seeing some types of hybrid policies or riders that basically allow drivers to be rideshare drivers. And then, it's okay with the insurance company. And Uber and Lyft will basically come and provide coverage and pick up the tab if you get into an accident. And honestly, I think it's such a simple solution to have some type of hybrid policy, because the insurance companies really aren't taking on any of the risks. They just say, hey, we'll cover you. We won't drop you. That's all drivers need, is just not being dropped. So my prediction for 2015 is that these insurance issues will get resolved. I mean, they kind of have to at this point, because insurance companies aren't taking on much risk and they're just very slow to adapt. You think governments are slow to adapt. Insurance companies have been even worse, because obviously these insurance companies are very risk averse. So anything that they don't understand, they're not going to insure until they do understand it. And I think they're slowly, we see in Colorado, Farmers, USAA are now insuring rideshare drivers. So we'll definitely see a big shift in 2015. And I think by the end of 2015, nearly that stat that I gave you might be reversed. Maybe only 10% of us won't have told our insurance companies. So definitely here's to some hoping and forward thinking on the insurance matter for 2015. All right, there's a dog out my window right now. All right, dog is gone. Let's do this. All right, if you guys are still with me out there, let me know in the comments whether you like the behind the scenes podcast or you'd rather just listen to it on iTunes or Stitcher. So far, it's pretty good. I haven't made any mistakes yet, so I haven't had to start over. But I usually just record in these little segments. So, I just did insurance. Now I'll cover regulatory, government stuff, and expansion. And basically, I don't really script these podcasts, but I have some notes, and I kind of just go off the notes and see how it goes from there. So far, so good. I think there's some pretty good content, pretty good information. I'm going to keep it going right now. All right, so we just covered the insurance side of things. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the regulations and the government stuff, as I like to call it. Because right now, as it stands, there's lots of issues. Uber is facing, regulatory and government issues and all this stuff in states all across the US and the world too. So, what's going to happen in 2015? I mean, as far as insurance, we think that's going to get worked out, but what about these fights with government regulators, and what about these fights with, obviously there's these taxi unions and all that kind of stuff. I mean, personally, I don't see this as a huge hurdle. Consumers, they want Uber and Lyft, right? It's just really the only people I see are kind of opposed to rideshare in general are people like taxi lobbyists and anyone that really stands to lose something from rideshare. So people that have maybe invested in some type of current infrastructure as far as taxis or anything like that. Now, for me, I think that I've never, I'm a fan of government in certain situations, but let's be honest, these guys can basically be bought with their votes can be bought. Lobbyists and, all this junk. I'm not going to get too political right now, but I mean, it's such a no-brainer for these government regulators and these politicians to support this, because not only do the consumers want this, but Uber has a team of, insanely high-paid lobbyists that are now lobbying for Uber and lobbying for rideshare in cities all across the country. So that's definitely something that I think is, it's kind of a sad state, but that's the way it is. I think Uber is a great thing for consumers, so it really shouldn't be too hard for government regulators to go in and support it. And I think government is just very slow to innovate, and they're very slow to accept change. So the part that I love about rideshare is that it's really pushing the boundary and pushing the envelope. This is the taxi laws shouldn't apply to rideshare because it's really not the same thing. And I mean, at its core, obviously you are calling a taxi with an app, but at the same time, it's such a new and innovative form of transportation. When you try to apply laws that are 20 or 30 years old to regulate something that's brand new and cutting edge, that just doesn't work. And in a lot of industries, you have to wait for the government to catch up. But what I love about companies like Uber, I'm about to say something that I love about them, is that they push the boundary and they don't wait around for government regulators, who are sitting around with a thumb up, where, and they don't wait around for them. They say, hey, there's a demand for this and people love it. People are enjoying it. So we're going to push the boundary. We're going to push the envelope and we're going to say, hey, if you guys want to come and adjust, that's great. But we're going to move forward. We're not going to wait around for you guys. So as far as in 2015, what's going to happen with the regulatory issues, I think Uber and Lyft are still going to face issues in cities all across the US. But I think it's just going to be slower in certain cities and slower in certain states. I mean, even in California, where you think is very progressive when it comes to rideshare, I mean, last week, the DMV just came out with this memo requiring all TNC cars to have commercial license plates. And when I saw that come out, I said, oh, you got to be kidding me. Have you seen Uber? There's no way that they would let this happen. I mean, let's say this ruling did come out. I mean, Uber is just going to go and tell all their partners, hey, go ahead and drive. We'll cover any legal fees or tickets or anything like that's going to happen. I mean, the whole reason that Uber has seen such monumental growth is because they're able to onboard drivers so quickly and they make it so easy, a low entry barrier to drive. Something like requiring commercial plates would just be insanity. And I know that would never work. And lo and behold, today or yesterday, the DMV came out and said, oh, wait, we made a mistake. We shouldn't have released that memo. So I think, we're going to see these small hurdles here and there, but they're definitely going to be achievable. And I think going forward in 2015, a lot of this regulation and government stuff, we're going to see issues pop up from time to time, but I can't imagine that cities are going to completely ban Uber or ban Lyft. I mean, they've done a good job. They've been smart about how they do it. They pop into a city, whether it's legal or not, the passengers love it. Everyone loves it. And then if they face issues, they say, all right, hey, if you guys aren't going to work with us, we'll pull out. And now you have all these consumers who got a taste of it. They got a taste of Uber. And they're going to be the ones who write in to their politicians and say, you guys got to get on this. Why don't we have Uber? Why don't we have Lyft? And you see it kind of in Las Vegas. I was there the other weekend and man, it was a pain. If I lived there, I would be pissed. There's no Uber. And I mean, there's lots of tech conventions and things like that coming into town. And I'm sure they'll start using that as a negotiating tactic. Hey, get Uber in here and make it easier, or we're going to take our conference other places. And when the money starts speaking, and that's when things start happening, and that's when things really start to see a change. So I think we'll see some hurdles, but honestly, in 2015, the international side is going to be way worse, if you ask me. I mean, we've seen international expansion from Uber so far. I think Lyft will definitely start expanding internationally in 2015, or maybe they might wait till 2016. But, if you guys think taxis were bad in the US, oh man, go travel internationally. The taxis are 10 times worse. I mean, I remember when I was on my honeymoon over the summer, I was reading these stories about, because I was trying to figure out how we were going to get places from the airport and just basically what we were going to do, whether we were going to do public transportation or taxi, or maybe there was even another option. And I was reading stories in places like Istanbul and places like Greece where the taxi cab drivers, the stories I was reading were just so shady. I mean, they would say, oh, you have to tell them this route to take, and they'll try to, if you're not paying attention, they'll run the meter up and press buttons to push the meter up. And I said, man, if you think taxis in the US are bad, just wait. I mean, there's obviously some great taxi drivers everywhere, but let's be honest, on a majority, a lot of these guys, and they're not very good at their job. They don't do it. They don't love it. They don't even like it, to be honest. And it's much worse internationally. I saw there's a big conference in Germany last week called Digital Life Design, and Travis Kalanick from Uber, the Uber CEO, spoke, and he was promising things like 10,000 jobs in every city, and 400,000 of cars off the road, and I think a lot of the message that they're sending is really good. They make Uber sound like it's going to be an awesome thing for the city. And while I do think it will help the cities, I think that at this point, these European regulators need to look to the US and see, because Europe is honestly a couple years behind on the whole rideshare spectrum. And there's a lot of opportunity in Europe to see, for other companies, not just Uber, to see, hey, what's gone well, what has Uber done well, and what have they done poorly, so that when they do expand, it's going to be different, right? You want things to be better every time. It's kind of like their second chance to expand globally. And I think the global rideshare market is even bigger than it is bigger than the US market. So that's the craziest part about rideshare. It's seen pretty explosive growth in the US, and it hasn't done anything in abroad. So, I think they like to make it seem like they're going to come in and really save these towns if they'll just remove these regulations and remove these barriers. But I think a lot of the taxi unions abroad are have a lot more solidarity, and because they've seen the past year or two in the US and what it's been like, and so they're kind of prepping. They know what's coming. So I think it's going to be a much tougher fight for Uber and Lyft to expand into Europe and to really take hold, because at this point in the US, Uber is a household name. They don't say, let's go get a taxi or let's get a Lyft. People say, hey, do you want to take an Uber? And I've heard people say, hey, let's get an Uber, whether they're calling a taxi or a Lyft or whatever. So Uber is kind of in the mainstream now, and we'll definitely see how it goes as far as when they expand abroad. But I think it's going to be a lot slower, and I think they're going to face a lot more problems and obstacles and barriers as far as international expansion. Ooh. All right, we're at 23 minutes right now. I'll probably keep this one around 50 minutes, so we'll see. All right, this should be a fun segment to record. Do a little Lyft versus Uber talk right now. Everyone's favorite. All right, let's do this. All right, so now we're going to do a bit of everybody's favorite topic, Lyft versus Uber. We'll talk about Lyft and talk about Uber, where they're headed in 2015, and maybe even throw in a sidecar reference or two and talk about a couple other companies. So, the first thing is, let's talk about Lyft. I've kind of made it clear that I'm rooting for Lyft. I like driving for Lyft. I prefer driving for Lyft, but I just make more money and get more requests with Uber. So it's really, I guess you'd call it a conundrum for me. And I know a lot of drivers feel that same way. But going forward in 2015, I think Lyft really needs to figure out what's their strategy going to be. Are they going to try and compete with Uber? I just feel like they're at such a disadvantage right now. Uber is 10 times bigger than Lyft. People, they're starting from so far behind. I wrote this article called, "Is the Downfall of Lyft Imminent?" And it got a ton of press and a ton of page views. And really the whole point of that article that I was trying to say was, what is Lyft's strategy going forward? I don't think that they're going to be super successful if they try to compete with Uber on all the same facets of rideshare. They can't be as cheap as Uber. They can't, provide the same, number of services and expand to the same number of cities, because frankly, they don't have the resources. They're basically, it's like, a small company trying to compete with a big company on all the same aspects. They really need to find what their strengths are and use that to their advantage. I think Lyft has a huge advantage when it comes to the community aspect. That's something that I really want to see them in 2015 take advantage of. Lyft is here to stay, guys. Let's be honest. Uber isn't going anywhere, but Lyft, they're here to stay. They're going to get some investments in 2015, and it probably won't be in the $1 billion range, but they're still going to get a few $100 million in cash or maybe more. And, I want them to play to their strengths and not basically squander this opportunity, because I don't know if they're ever going to well, I don't think that they're not gonna surpass Uber in 2015, maybe at some point way far down the road. But Lyft has this community aspect where they are your friend with a car. And to be honest, Uber's slogan, you're a private driver. I don't want to be someone's freaking private driver. I'm not a private driver. Okay, guys, I don't do this so I can serve other people. I drive because I like helping other people. I like talking to other people. I like driving my friends around. And that's what I like about Lyft. It's so much more friendly, right? Kind of all the stereotypes that they say about Lyft versus Uber passengers are all true. Lyft passengers sit in the front. They're more likely to tip, well, because of the app, but that's a separate story. And, all those aspects are what I like about Lyft. And I know a lot of you drivers out there like that about Lyft too. Now, I think this is a smaller market share. This may be more friend with a car, but is there anything wrong with that? I mean, does Lyft has this mindset where they have to go out and be the biggest and best, but I don't think there's anything wrong with taking 25% of the market, let Uber have the 75%, but just doing a really killer job with that 25% and being an awesome $15 billion company instead of a mega giant $100 billion company like Uber is going to be. So, the problem with a lot of these startups that I see is that really in order to succeed and get to that 1 billion mark, geez, I kind of throw around 1 billion like it's nothing, but in order to get to that 1 billion mark, you have to have a $100 billion mindset. And so what I mean by that is, the tactics and the mindset that you have to have as a CEO and the mindset that your company has to have in order to get to that first billion and be really successful. You have to have the same mindset that's going to get you to $100 billion. And we know that Uber has that. I mean, you can see from their expansion and their growth, they don't care about drivers. They don't care about anyone but themselves and their growth, which is okay, fine. But they're going to try and get to the top with that. I mean, me personally, that's not how I run my businesses. I want to see growth in my own business, but I also want to, I would rather make less money if I can make the people that work for me happier. If I know that they're happier and I can pay them better, that makes me happy. And I'm probably, with that strategy, never going to get to, a $500,000 a year gig or something like that. But I'm okay with that. I'd be okay with making $100,000 a year. I think a lot of you guys might be okay with that. But that's the whole point of what I'm trying to say. I want Lyft to be more like me. I'm okay with making less, but being super happy. And everyone that I work with is super happy. And it's just a great job all around. Uber, the problem with them is they're going to alienate a lot of their workforce because they're trying to get to that $100 billion. And, I think it kind of bleeds into what our friends over at Uber are doing. I like to call them the other guys with a U, UTHER. But, so now I toured Uber at the end of December. They actually, they've got some insanely smart people working up there. One of my friends up in San Francisco made a joke that if you can't get a job at Uber, you go work for Lyft. And to be honest, I think that's true. A lot of people from the smartest people at Lyft are going over to Uber. I mean, we've seen news stories. And if you can't get hired at Uber, you go to Lyft, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that, though. And, Uber, they've got right now working at Uber as a headquarters as far as an amazing job. They have positions opening up in cities across the country and across the globe. They're getting hundreds of qualified applicants. I have a few contacts over on the inside. And so I really have a good sense of what it's like to work at Uber. And I mean, it's definitely a cool job and an amazing opportunity. And people are going to propel their career in ways that they probably never thought possible just from 1 or 2 years at Uber. But it's not a company that is looking out for the best interest of all its employees. And let's not kid ourselves, as rideshare drivers, we obviously own our own business, but Uber is our majority of our income, right, for drivers. So, Uber's main thing, they're all about growth. In 2015, it's going to get even worse. They're going to be more focused on growth. And, when your focus is all on growth, the only thing that's going to affect how you treat your drivers and how you treat as drivers, we're kind of disposable to Uber. We've seen that. They can just onboard new drivers from Lyft. They'll pay them $500. They'll hire 40,000 drivers in December of 2014 like they did. And, they just announced a survey. I'll put a link in the show notes, but they have 160,000 drivers right now who are active within the past 6 months. And 40,000 of them joined in December. I mean, that's insane right there, okay? 40,000 drivers are joining. So, they're growing and The only thing that I can say to that growth is that when driver attrition starts to affect that growth, that's when it's going to be a problem for Uber. That's when they're going to start saying, hey, drivers, you guys are pissed. You guys are upset. What can we do for you? How can we help? How can we make it better as a driver? And until they can't onboard 40,000 drivers in 1 month, they're going to keep on focusing on growth, and they're going to prioritize growth above everything else. And they're going to prioritize growth over, driver happiness, basically, for lack of a better term. I mean, there's definitely some drivers out there who are very vocal, and, some of you guys even on my site who are very vocal that you're not happy with Uber right now, and that's okay. But at the same time, you have to realize that there are they just onboarded 40,000 drivers, and those drivers don't know what it used to be like. They don't know how much money you used to make. So imagine 25% of your workforce, they're coming in bright-eyed and fresh, and they probably really enjoy working for Uber because what they did before this was not good. So, they're now in a better situation. I mean, one of the big things we've seen that started to affect Uber's growth is their treatment in media. And in 2014, man, it was the year of horrible media stories for Uber. I mean, we do a Friday roundup every Friday, and it seemed like every single week it was something worse. We obviously had Ubergate, and then the privacy issues, and just everything. So, I think in 2015, we've already started to see Uber's going to start treating the media better, because they're starting to see, at first, they really had kind of a laissez-faire attitude towards the media. Hey, you guys can write whatever you want about us. We don't care. We're going to do our own thing. But now, hey, passengers are starting to take notice. Oh man, Uber, what's up with all these media stories? I mean, they're getting covered in all these top sites, Business Insider, Bloomberg, and even mainstream stuff, CNN and Time, and the stories aren't good. They're bad for Uber. And at first, Uber said, hey, this is, we can weather this storm. We don't need to talk to the media. We're going to kind of do our own thing. And I mean, I obviously know a lot of reporters in the industry, and for a while there, they couldn't even call Uber. These Ubergate stories would break and they'd have to email them, just like passengers. So you could only imagine, and you guys as drivers, you guys know how frustrating it is to have to email Uber when you have an urgent matter. So imagine a reporter who's used to being able to get someone on the phone and kind of get, their questions answered. Now they're emailing Uber, emailing the press department at Uber and waiting for a response, kind of like drivers. So just imagine, and I think that really fueled a lot of the basically anti-Uber sentiments in the media, because these media guys, that first of all, they're getting a ton of views and a ton of page clicks and all that kind of good stuff when they write bad stuff about Uber, because that's what people want to read. People don't really want to read Uber's doing this great and Uber's doing that great. And the other thing was, all of it was true. A lot of the stuff that people are writing, it might be kind of attention grabbing headlines, but a lot of that stuff was true that they were writing. So I think in 2015 we've already started to see Uber has realized, hey, the way we're treating the media has not been working well. I don't know why it's taken them so long to realize this, but if you start treating the media, they have a huge impact on our growth and our vision for the company. If we start treating the media better, it's going to be better for the company. I mean, they just hosted a few weeks ago a big happy hour in San Francisco, open bar, my sources tell me, but they just hosted a big happy hour for media and reporters to come and say, hey, obviously San Francisco, there's a ton of tech reporters that cover Uber, and I mean, there's some reporters that their beat is covering Uber or, these tech companies and rideshare and the sharing economy, and they say, hey, come join us, and really to put a face on the company, because it's easy for us as drivers, for me to sit there and say, hey, I'm going to talk about Uber like it's this faceless entity, like it's this faceless corporation, like a Walmart or someone like that. But when you start meeting people and you start developing a relationship with certain people, you might feel bad. I mean, you can't help it, but subconsciously you're going to feel bad, say, oh man, I'm writing this article totally against Uber and just hating on them and bagging on them. But I mean, I have this Uber employee's number in my cell phone now. They texted me last week. They bought me dinner last week. And I don't know why it took Uber so long to realize that. But when you really start putting a face behind the company, it's a lot more difficult for people, whether they realize it or not, to remain unbiased. So, I think that's one thing Uber's really going to look to in 2015, kind of cozying up to the media. And, they're really their main focus. You think about all this stuff, right? Growth and being nicer to the media, more drivers, getting the cost down so that they can gain more passengers and more rides. What's this all for? Why are they doing all of this? And what I think is probably should be obvious or should be apparent by now is they're going to be having a mega IPO at some point in late 2015 or even early 2016. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, basically Uber is a private company right now, and once they have an IPO, that basically means that their shares will go to sale on the public market on, NASDAQ or S&P 500 or something like that, and everyday people like you and I can buy stock in Uber. And that's basically when all the people at headquarters get a cash in on their percentage, their equity in the company, and all of Uber's investors who have put, all the billions of dollars that get invested in Uber at a certain valuation. When it goes to IPO, if the stock's, whatever price that they set, if the price goes above, now all these people can cash in and really see what kind of return they're going to get on their investment. So, I think I've seen some people. I think it's kind of obvious at this point that everything that Uber is doing is all for this IPO. The growth in drivers, the growth in passengers, stealing drivers from Lyft. This is all to make their numbers look as good as possible on paper. And honestly, it's probably working very well because I don't think a lot of these investors see what we as drivers see from the inside. I mean, we're out there on the ground floor and we see that, man, I don't know a ton of drivers who love driving for Uber. I mean, I have a pretty positive audience. Everyone that listens to my show and reads my articles, they're positive. I mean, that's kind of the audience that I've tried to cultivate, people that like driving. And if you don't like it, go do something about it. I don't like using my site as a forum to complain about Uber, because if I don't like the way something is, I'm going to do something about it. I try to look for ways to make, a side business, like my last podcast, I did a podcast on creating a side business out of Uber. I mean, I'm always looking for ways to take advantage of the opportunities that come as a rideshare driver. And if it wasn't working for me, I would get out of it. I wouldn't do it anymore. So, I think we kind of see that, hey, driving for Uber sounds great to people on the outside when Uber puts all these numbers, all these BS, things like lower fares mean more money for drivers. I mean, every driver will tell you that that's complete BS. But, when you look at it from an outside point of view and you have investors and on paper, Uber probably looks like an amazing, amazing company to invest in. And Uber really is trying to look like on paper for this great company. And we'll see what happens at this IPO. I mean, I know some people have said, oh, Travis TK, he's going to try and cash out as soon as this company goes public. But I mean, I don't think that's going to happen at all. This guy has worked the past 3 or 4 years to build this company from the ground up. And I think he's going to stay there. I mean, he's never going to get a better opportunity as far as a business, have more power, and really to make an impact on a global stage and change the way that people get around and change the way packages get delivered. And I just can't see him leaving. I mean, he's going to have plenty of money. He cashes out a quarter of his options and he'll be a billionaire. So I don't see him leaving at all. So, that's going to be, I'm very curious to see, because they're really positioning themselves for this IPO, but at the same time, they're alienating a lot of drivers and a lot of passengers. So we'll really see if these alienated drivers, the unhappy drivers, are in the minority or not. And that's what I think 2015 is going to be a big outlook. So, real quick, before I move on, I'm just going to touch on our friends over at Sidecar. So, with Sidecar, I'm going to say don't call it a comeback. I mean, for those who don't know, they used to be the big boy in San Francisco when this whole rideshare thing started. Sidecar was it. And through a series of, let's call them missteps, they've really fallen to the wayside and no one really knows about them. But they've had some pretty good things pop up. I think 2015 we could see, with this ongoing Uber and Lyft price war. I mean, if Sidecar really, hopefully that they learn from what's working well. And drivers are just looking for a company that's going to cater to their needs. And I think if a company like Sidecar comes along with the infrastructure, solid infrastructure that's already there, we'll see that they could make a little comeback. And just treating drivers well and paying them well. Obviously their biggest problem is getting more passengers. So we'll definitely see how that goes. And, I think in addition to Sidecar, we're going to see a ton of localized, specialized rideshare companies emerge. Now, I wish you guys could see, you guys probably don't know what I mean, but I wish you guys could see some of these emails that I get on a daily basis from these small little companies that are popping up left and right, and they want me to, talk about them on their site. And I'm like, hey, dudes, I can't really write about an article about a company that appeals to scooter drivers in Santa Monica, right? I mean, there are ton of these random little I call them rideshare companies, but companies that basically allow drivers to rent out their truck, or you can rent out the back of their truck and they'll help you move, or I use that scooter example as kind of an exaggeration, but we're seeing a ton of local kind of niche or specialized rideshare companies popping up. And I think there's going to be a market for all of those. And they're going to be popping up in 2015. I mean, one that I kind of featured in my 2015 Outlook post is Hop Skip Drive. I'll give them a quick shout out because I think they have an interesting business model, but they're going to start transporting basically kids only. So, I know you guys out there I'm sure you've had a little run-in where you had to take some like high school kid or something like that, or the parent calls it. That happens to me all the time now. But, there's going to be these companies popping up, and I think there's going to be fierce competition, actually. I mean, they're not going to be directly competing with Uber, but I think we're going to see a lot of options for drivers when it comes to these other niche markets. You're probably not going to see the Uber Lyft sidecar model, but you're going to see a lot of these smaller niche, rent a truck or rent a two-door or rent a, ride with me in my sports car type Uber apps. And, I think we're going to see a lot of these specialized companies emerging in 2015 because we're right now, let's face it, we're seeing a huge boom in investment, and these companies that are emerging are getting a lot of investment. So definitely stay tuned in 2015. I mean, you're going to see companies, obviously Postmates are some of the big ones, and, lots of DoorDash and all of these companies that are really going to start integrating well with more drivers. And I think it's definitely a great thing for drivers because it gives you guys more options and just other ways to diversify your income. Because obviously we've seen we don't want to depend on Uber. We don't want to depend on Lyft as our sole source of income. I mean, if we can find a few services and, we'll see what happens as far as, I think it's all good for drivers because we're going to see a ton of explosive growth in this field in 2015. And the best thing is it's all going to benefit drivers just by giving you guys more options. So definitely stay tuned for that. Whew. That was a long segment. Okay. All right. I got to pee, but let's crush through these. All right, got one last topic, and then I got a really fun one too. What I'm gonna be doing on Rideshare Guy in 2015. Got a lot of good stuff. What I've got planned, that'll be pretty cool. Oops. All right, my first screw up. Forgot to add a new little bar. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about are these explosion that we're going to see in 2015, and we've already started to see it, of companies that support 1099 workers. Now, I kind of touched on some companies that are, in these small niche markets that might not necessarily compete with Uber and Lyft, but they're going to be out there for drivers. And now I'm going to talk about a few that are basically out there to support drivers, and kind of like my site. I mean, these companies, I call them kind of rideshare resources, and companies that are basically, they're looking out for the best interest of drivers. Their success depends on your success and vice versa. Now, these companies I kind of really enjoy because they align with my goal and vision. Uber and Lyft, they're kind of looking out for themselves. And as we've seen, that the more money they make, that doesn't necessarily mean the more money we'll make. They care more about themselves. But there's some awesome companies out there like SherpaShare, Zen99, Breeze, Groove, Kung Fu. These companies have all popped up in 2014, and there's going to be more coming in 2015. And these are the kind of companies that personally you're probably going to see a lot of on the site, because not necessarily as advertising. Well, if they're willing to pay me, I'll definitely have them advertise on my site. I mean, as you guys know, Sherpa, I have a nice relationship with them. I've had Ryder on the podcast, and I have an affiliate link to sign up with them. But, these companies that are supporting rideshare drivers like Sherpa and Zen99, the greatest thing about them, well, first of all, they're free for drivers. And the coolest thing about them is that they're helping you guys. And that's what my whole site is about. I'm trying to help drivers. I want you guys to earn more money. I mean, I always like to say that I love driving, and I have a blast going out there and driving people around, but there are a lot of other things I would rather do with my time. I'd rather spend time with my wife. I would rather, go hang out with my friends. But the reason why I drive is obviously because I make money, but at the same time, it's a job that I enjoy and I can also make money. So that's something to keep in mind. And a lot of these companies that you'll probably see myself aligning with in 2015 are companies that support you guys as drivers. So, we've seen some really cool stuff. For example, one of the companies that I've really been talking to lately, Groove and Breeze. Groove is this clubhouse in San Francisco that started, and I could totally see this popping up in every market, because as you guys know, when you're out there driving, you got to pee, you want to get a quick snack. Where do you go, right? It's kind of like a cool hangout. And I really think that because these companies, Uber and Lyft, aren't developing that community, hey, let's go out there and do it ourselves. I mean, that's the whole goal of my site. I want to develop a community for drivers. And if I can align myself with other companies like Groove that are developing this community for drivers, that's going to be a cool thing. And I think it's really going to be a win-win for everyone. And so these are kind of the companies I think we'll see exploding in 2015. I mean, we're going to have hundreds of thousands of drivers, and we're going to need services to support us. And the greatest thing is, it's in the best interest of these types of resources and support companies to have us make the most money. They're looking out for us, because the better we do, the better they do, and vice versa. So it's in our best interest. So if you see these companies popping up, make sure that you support them. I mean, I know you guys are all listening right now because you probably support my site. And when I see the interaction and the emails and the comments that I get, and you guys are so thankful, that makes me feel good. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I didn't start this site to make money. I started it because I wanted to help people. And if money comes down the road at some point and I can make money, then that's awesome. But at the same time, it's a great feeling to be able to help people. And I know that a lot of these resources and support companies, I've talked to the CEOs, they feel the same way. They're doing something, and they're doing something meaningful. So I definitely think we'll see a lot of that going forward in 2015. So make sure you guys support those companies. All right, 2 more sections left. We're at 46 minutes. Probably go another 10 minutes. So if you guys have stayed with me this long on YouTube, you guys are killing it. Wow. This is a nice long podcast, but definitely, hopefully you guys are getting a lot out of this. And I think, I personally, I like watching YouTube videos. So that's kind of why I'm testing out this video. And just seeing, we'll see what the feedback is like, and I might even release it a little bit early on YouTube, so you guys can kind of get that free preview to kind of reward you guys for checking out the video. But all right, let's do this. One more section. This is gonna be a fun section for me to record. Basically, all the things I have planned, my plans for 2015. So I think some of you might not care about it, but I obviously care about it. So let's do this. Now, the last and final topic that I'm going to cover for my 2015 outlook and what's in store for rideshare is actually going to be more what's in store for the rideshare guy. That's me and my site. Now, 2015 is actually the year of the goat, right? On the Chinese New Year. I'm half Chinese, for those of you guys who don't know, but I just saw that the other day. But in reality, though, for rideshare guy, 2015 is going to be my year. All right, that was really stupid. I didn't like the way that sounded. I had that in my notes, but what was I thinking? The year of the goat. I saw this little thing on about the Chinese New Year, and I was going to go into the story all about that, and what animal I am. I'm a cheetah, by the way, but I don't think you guys care about that. All right, let's try that again. I'm going to just ignore that part and just go straight on. All right. Now, the last topic that we're going to cover when it comes to 2015 and what's in store for rideshare is actually what's in store for the rideshare guy. Now, 2015 so far for me, it's shaping up to be the year of the video. As you guys know, I released my YouTube channel. I'm actually doing a YouTube video right now. This podcast, you can view this on a little behind the scenes of what it's like for me to make a podcast on YouTube. I'll put a link in the show notes if you guys want to check that out. But I have a YouTube channel now. I'm working with a guy named Brian Cole, who's a big YouTube contributor as far as rideshare. And we're also releasing one of the first video courses called MaximumRidesharingProfits.com. So it's going to be a lot of the stuff that I cover on the site, but in a super compact, super value-filled, basically, medium. So you guys can all check it out on video and kind of view the course, the modules at your leisure, and basically just trying to pack a lot of information for those who are really interested in investing in their career and kind of want to go above and beyond. Because I think in 2015, the drivers who are going to be the most successful are the ones who really invest in their career and really start looking at this like a business and saying, hey, I need to get better at this. What are the resources that are available out there that can make me a better driver? Now, I'm definitely going to keep on doing one podcast every 2 weeks. It is kind of a lot of work, but I know that you guys enjoy it. It was kind of funny on my survey. So I got some interesting comments about my podcast. So for those of you who said my podcasts are too long, I'm sorry about this one. It's kind of a long one, but hopefully you guys definitely stay tuned. I got some shorter ones and some cool interviews coming up. I'm going to have some really good guests coming on. And I'm actually on terrestrial radio now, too. I mentioned that at the top of the show over in Chicago. So if you guys are listening on radio, definitely big thanks to you guys. The problem with the podcast, it's kind of hard to get sponsors, although I do kind of have one, Your Mechanic. I have a nice little affiliate deal where they pay me a small commission for every person that I sign up. So if you guys are out there and you are in need of any car service, they're a pretty cool company. They actually offer mobile mechanics that will come to your house, do everything from an oil change to new tires. And if you use the code RSG20, you'll actually get $20 off your first service. So you could have an oil change at your house done for $20. So it's a pretty cool service. They're kind of like the Uber of mechanics. So it's pretty easy for me to align with them. And then, I can kind of get a little support that way to keep me going and even make a couple bucks here and there. Now, as far as, we're going to have a lot of new stuff though, right? So obviously this YouTube channel and keep doing the podcast, but I actually have the first ever Rideshare Guy app that's going to be coming. So believe it or not, I'm working with an app developer right now, and we're going to have an iOS and Android app. So you guys are basically going to be able to download this app, and we're going to have a lot of cool stuff on there. Obviously, all of the blog content is going to be syndicated on there as far as YouTube videos and podcasts and articles. Basically, it's just going to be, we're going to see where it goes. We're definitely be open to a lot of feedback, but I see that, as you guys know, obviously as drivers, mobile is huge for drivers, and I really just want to see where this app goes and come up with me and my developer, we have a ton of ideas going forward. I think it's really going to be a cool app, and initially it'll probably be pretty basic to start, but we're going to see where it goes and see what the demand is like and take it from there. I think we're going to have some really cool, there's a lot of branches that we can go off from this app to help you guys with stuff. So that's definitely going to be a cool thing. And then as you guys have probably seen, I've definitely been doing a great job of getting into some media mentions, and kind of that's definitely helped grow the blog. Obviously that Wired piece was huge, but going forward in 2015, all these media mentions, I pretty much, they help just get more exposure, and it really helps. Obviously it helps me personally, but it also helps kind of uniting drivers, because we want that one place. I mean, you go on Facebook and there's thousands or hundreds and thousands of these little groups that are kind of all splintered, and I'm really trying to build this community of drivers that are all think alike. And at one point I do hope that when I write an article, Uber and Lyft will take notice, because we have a lot of drivers that'll listen to what I say, and I try to keep my finger on the pulse of drivers and what's going on. As you guys know, there's a huge disconnect between Uber headquarters and what it's like out there on the road. So my job, that as I look at it, I try to fill that gap and fill that void. So the media mentions are probably the biggest thing for me as how I can grow my site in 2015. You guys can definitely help by trying to basically tell every driver if you guys are digging the content and you have stuff that you think, if you think that I'm providing good value, definitely, convince people why they should listen and why they should read my stuff. And even feel free to pitch me ideas in, because I'm always looking for great contributors. I'm going to be trying to get my content syndicated on a few media sites. So when I write a good article, or even just in general, trying to reach a broader audience. And I think that's going to benefit everyone. I'm obviously going to keep on doing 3 to 4 articles a week. I'm always looking for new topics. So that's something that I'm going to keep doing in 2015. And I'll probably even, some of the feedback I got from my surveys, you guys want to see more city-specific stuff and local stuff and guest posts. So I'm definitely going to try and do that once a week. So I'll keep on finding those high-quality guest posts. And so that's kind of what I have going forward in 2015. Obviously, the site has seen a lot of success in 2014, but at this point, I kind of want to keep it going and keep on providing, fresh and new content and bringing new things and covering all the best topics. So, personally, a lot of you guys have asked me if I'm ever going to quit my full-time job. And I think because I am putting a ton of effort in the site and I love doing it. I want to do more, but my time is kind of limited. And that's definitely something I've considered going forward in 2015. Obviously, things like this video course and figuring out the app. The app will be free, but, if there's opportunities where I can parlay into making money. Basically, my goal, though, always is to kind of provide that valuable and free content. And then if I start offering premium services, that might be a way where I can make some money to kind of consider doing something like this full time. And I've actually been in talks with a couple smaller rideshare startups. No Ubers or Lyfts or anything like that, but about consulting. And as you guys know, I've been doing some coaching, and with the video course, we're going to be selling some coaching and kind of go down that road for people who are interested, but also consulting for companies in the rideshare space, because that's something that I really enjoy. I really enjoy any company that's out there helping drivers, and if I can make their company better, there are a couple that I'm in talks with right now to basically become their CCO, is what I call it, a chief content officer. But there are a few companies that I'm talking to, and we'll see if we can go down that road, and I can maybe consult for a few and help them out at 10 to 15 hours a week or something in that range, where I'd still be able to kind of remain, unbiased and still work on this site, but also make some money on the side and kind of pursue this field and this passion of mine. So definitely stay tuned for that. And if you guys have, I'm going to give a quick shout out to a new podcast. So I told you guys at the beginning to stay tuned. There's a new Rideshare podcast coming out. And believe it or not, our friends over at Lyft are coming out with their own podcast. So go to, you can check it out and find it by the time this podcast is live. Their first episode should be live. I'll leave a link in the show notes, or you can go to therideshareguy.com/Lyft podcast, and I'll link it up there. But, basically, I also put a behind the scenes YouTube video. I recorded a 5-minute segment for this Lyft podcast. So I definitely think it's a great idea by Lyft and great initiative. I think that it's going to help build that sense of community, and hopefully they'll be providing valuable content. So definitely go. I only release one podcast every 2 weeks. So the more rideshare podcasts, the merrier. All right. Ooh. Ow, my neck. All right, let's do one final section. And you guys are free to go. Oh, all right. Let's do this. So I hope you guys enjoyed my outlook for rideshare in 2015, and there's obviously big things in the work. Things are changing, and I did this huge post where I got a bunch of expert opinions last week. Oh geez, let me start that over. I had to burp. If you guys notice, I usually only start over if I screw up in the first 10 seconds or something. But I kind of keep not too much editing here, so let's try that again. Okay, let's do this. I think this is going to be a good little quick 5-minute segment. It's going to be good, though. Ready? All right, I hope you... I'm not going to start with all right. All right, now I'm getting nitpicky. Let's just do this. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed my outlook on rideshare for 2015. And basically, the whole point of this podcast and the post that I did last week is to really give you guys a look into the future of rideshare, the issues and things that, basically because I enjoy doing this. I enjoy being a driver, and I want you guys to enjoy it too and have something to look forward to. And it's also fun to make predictions. Maybe at the end of the year, we'll come back and see how I did on all my predictions, see if I was completely off base or right on, right on target. So, the last thing I want to touch on is things are for sure changing in rideshare right now. I mean, the landscape and the situation today is by no means what it's going to look like in a year from now or even a few months from now. And, I think that as drivers and business owners, this is kind of typical of what it's like to own your own business. I mean, there are a lot of ups and downs. There are a lot of issues that come about. And obviously, you guys have the ability to solve a lot of those, but there's some that are out of your control. So I like to not worry about things that are beyond my control, but at the same time, everything that is in your control, you guys got to go out there and take advantage of the opportunities that are out there. You can't expect someone else to solve your problems. I mean, really, I want, the whole point of everything that I do on the podcast and everything that I do on the blog is to make you guys think more like a business and go out there and don't expect to make $40 an hour. If you want to earn that, you got to figure out a way to do it. Okay. I think you have a certain percentage of drivers out there who expect that, oh, I'm going to flip on the app and I'm going to get a ton of rides and make a ton of money. And if I don't, I'm going to complain. I have never had that attitude. And I know that a lot of my readers and listeners don't have that attitude either. So basically, as business owners and drivers, you have to be able to weather the low periods, weather the storm, figure out ways to make it, figure out ways to cut it, because rideshare isn't going anywhere, okay? Maybe you're not making as much as you want right now, but if that's where prices are, you got to figure out ways to get around it and figure out ways to make more money right now, because I guarantee you the best drivers, the best business owners are figuring out ways, right? If you want to be in that top 10%, you have to go out and do the things that make you in the top 10%, okay? A lot of drivers think that, hey, average is good. But in a job like this, where it's high demand, I mean, all the reasons that you love being a driver, the flexibility, the money, other people see that. There's a low entry barrier. Uber and Lyft make it a low entry barrier. To be a driver, let's be honest, you don't need a lot of qualifications. So imagine the pool that you're competing with, right? There are a lot of other drivers out there, and you hold the power. Basically, you hold the leverage, right? You can go out there and make your situation better. You just have to figure it out, okay? So that's obviously a big goal on my site, but I think at the same time, right, we don't want to be kind of at Uber and Lyft's mercy, okay? You guys got to figure out ways to leverage Uber instead of the other way around. You should see by now that the TNC priority is not drivers, it's growth, okay? In 2015, I don't see that changing. The only way things are going to change is if driver unrest and driver unhappiness, and not having enough drivers starts to affect that growth. Then things are going to get better, right, as drivers on a whole. But I still think there's a ton of opportunity for the individuals who want to go out there and be the best and do the best to really make an impact, right? We have 160,000 Uber drivers. They just released that number in a study. 40,000 new drivers in December. That's competitive. That's competition. Now, there's obviously, I'm big on collaboration between like-minded people because I think there's a ton of opportunity. There's going to be a lot of people, you could tell them exactly what to do to get better tips, to do better, to make more money per hour, and they're never going to do it. They're not going to do it. Their brain isn't wired that way. And those people are a lot of the people who are going to be complaining. But if you're listening to this podcast right now, if you read the articles on my site, you're probably not that way. You come in with a mindset that you have competition. That's okay. How are you going to outdo? How are you going to outwork? How are you going to beat them? Right? And that's really the mindset that you have to have going forward in 2015. Okay. I'd like to say kind of the golden era of being a driver is gone, right? Being a driver now, you're probably not going to make as much money as you did a year and a half ago when people were probably honestly overpaid. I mean, it was such a new thing. They're still figuring out pricing. And now things are going to slowly settle into a steady state. But I think that steady state in 2015 is going to be a good steady state for drivers. I mean, just look at the opportunity and the money and everything that's out there for you. So basically, going forward in 2015, I'm keeping a super positive outlook, and I know that there's going to be ups and downs, but at the same time, when it's down, I'm going to be figuring out ways to bring it back up. And when it's up, I'm not going to be satisfied with getting up and getting to the top. You kind of have to come in with that Uber mindset, right? That once you get to the top, you got to keep on going, right? So you guys are out there as business owners, find that balance and find something that's going to work for you. And I think you guys are really going to have a great 2015. All right, cheers. Ooh, okay, 1 hour of recording time. If you guys made it all the way to the end, I thank you. And on YouTube, we're about 1 hour and 10 minutes. This file, wow, it's getting pretty big. But definitely big ups to you guys for staying on, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Definitely leave a comment in the background or in the comment section and let me know what you think. All right, cheers, YouTube.